Good evening, friends, and welcome to Sleepytime Tales, a podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. Do you find your mind plagued with the stresses of modern life, especially when the lights are out and you're trying to get a restful night? Do you find your mind spinning and churning? Follow my voice down the path towards a good night's rest. Listen to me tell a story that will keep your mind from wandering to your daytime problems. The ones you can't solve right now and will be easier to solve well rested. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift, following the twists and turns but slowly letting go and drifting into the deep night. Now, I generally try to keep things quite light on this show, but tonight I'm going to shout out a true crime podcast. One that I think is a little bit special, that stands out from the many other true crime podcasts out there. True Crime South Africa is a podcast that is very well researched and put together, like much of its competition, but unlike a lot of the others I've listened to, it doesn't sensationalize the crimes. Host Nicole Engelbrecht is very authentic and knowledgeable. She's also got a very warm sort of feel, and she keeps the show focused on the victims, and not in a sensationalized kind of way. You definitely get a sense listening to it that she cares about these people, these victims of sometimes horrific crimes. So I'd recommend it's definitely worth taking a look at. All the relevant content warnings though, sometimes the crimes she speaks about are quite alarming and shocking. So I don't recommend listening to it before bedtime, but it's something to maybe listen to while you're driving to work. It's worth a look. So that's True Crime South Africa, and I've linked it in the show notes. Also, little one, last week I made a major boo-boo. I mentioned the AnxZenity Podcast, a mental health podcast for people with anxiety. But I was very clever and I forgot to put any links in the show notes for it. I'll put them in later, but if you downloaded the show early and haven't seen the updated show notes, you may have missed all that stuff. And so I've already put it in the show notes for this episode. And so if you were interested and couldn't find the show, now you can take a look. So sorry about that. I'm not one of those podcasts that really pushes people to make ratings on and reviews on Apple Podcasts. I always appreciate them, but to me, reviewing a podcast is actually often quite a lot of work. I'm generally driving or something, so by the time I've gotten to where I'm going, I've completely forgotten what I've listened to. So it's not something I push people to do, but I've got to say I do appreciate it when I get them. So I've got one recently that came through. It was posted by Mad Piper from Canada on August the 3rd. Mad Piper says, "My young daughter and I both listen to help shut our minds off and fall asleep. She asks for this podcast most nights to help give her comfort and fall asleep quickly." So short and sweet. Thank you very much for your kind words, Mad Piper. And hello, little Piper. I'm glad I help you at night. And this definitely highlights the wisdom for dropping my Twin Peaks episodes, so thank you for that. I'm still trying to get more people to sign up to the newsletter. My plan is, as I mentioned, to send it out weekly, but at the moment I've got exactly one subscriber, so whoever you are, thank you very much. I do appreciate it, but if a few more people could sign up this week, and I'm going to start sending stuff out by the end of the month, that would be great. So if you're at all interested in keeping in the loop about new episodes, new blog posts, interesting things I find on social media, interesting news stories, all sleep-focused stuff, hit my link in the show notes or go to newsletter.sleepytimetales.net and that'll take you straight to the sign-up. And then also I'm trying to get a few more people to sign up for my Audible trial. That one gives me $15 a sign-up, so it's very handy. Like basically one sign-up covers most of my monthly hosting costs, and I'm wanting to do some equipment upgrades. So if I can get like 15 sign-ups, that would be just amazing. I could do a major upgrade that would make a big improvement to my sound quality. So it costs you nothing. You get a free ebook, so maybe just hit the link there as well. That's audibletrial.com/sleepytime. And sign up for a 30-day free trial. Gives you a free audiobook to keep and helps support this podcast. And I'm not going to waffle on too much about the other little bits and pieces. If you're inclined, take a swing by and take a look at the Patreon and Radio Public. where I put weekly bonus episodes up exclusive to those platforms. So for as little as $1 a month, you get an extra episode a week of the Catnap minisodes, and also you can listen to them on Radio Public for free. But then advertising gets inserted, and I'm not too sure what that advertising is like. Hopefully it doesn't disturb anyone's sleep. I'm actually curious to hear what sort of ads people get, so if you want to pop me a line on any of the social media or the email contact@sleepytimetales.net, that would be great. Thank you very much. And then the music in this episode and all episodes thus far is Un Désert by Kumiku. Their music is available on the Free Music Archive. A lot of it is public domain, so if you have a podcast or a YouTube show or something like that, maybe worth you taking a look at. I've linked their website and their Patreon in the show notes, as there's some very cool stuff, and it would be cool if some of my listeners could support that if so inclined. So what exactly is Sleepy Time Tales, and what is the point of a sleep podcast? To answer your question, I'm going to start with a common problem. Do you find that you lie awake at night with your mind spinning and emotions in turmoil with the anxieties of 21st century life? Do you wake up in the middle of the night and find yourself not quite able to doze back off at 3 a.m.? I'm here to help. My name is Dave, and I'm your narrator, here to talk you into a restful night. I'm someone who has struggled to sleep ever since I was a baby. My parents had sleepless nights with me for many years, and even once I got old enough not to bother them anymore, I always struggled to sleep. It was very late in life, unfortunately, by the time I was in my mid-30s, when I discovered that droning male voices have a tendency to just knock me out cold. For quite a long time, I used to listen to various podcasts at night in the dark with my earbuds in, specifically for the purpose of falling asleep. Quite recently, though, I discovered that sleep podcasts actually are a thing. I found one that worked quite well for me, especially designed for the purpose of distracting the restless mind to help to stop that spinning that tends to keep us awake. And while it worked very well for me, when I recommended it to others, they didn't like the narrator's voice. There wasn't anything else quite like it that I could find, and so I wondered if I could make an alternative with my droning voice. And here it is. Every episode starts with this long, rambling intro, and it's there for a couple of reasons. If you don't like the long, rambling intro, this show may not be for you. Or you can sign up on Patreon and get the show without intros. But the purpose here is there's two reasons for it, for this long intro. There is for new listeners, my aim is to explain the structure of the show and what the purpose is and how I'm sort of envisioning you engaging with the show in order to help you get a restful night. And while I do that, all the listeners, for them, this is part of the sort of habits of going to sleep that I'm trying to create. They take this opportunity, and you, new listener, can do the same while I'm talking, to make sure the lights are out and stop staring at your phone. If you're using it to listen to this, put it somewhere where you can't see the lights. Have a drink of water. Make sure your room's not too hot, because a slightly cooler environment makes it easier to sleep. Make sure the lights are out, and wrap yourself nice and warmly in your blankets. Or if you're like me, you probably sleep with one leg out of the blanket to sort of help regulate your temperature. That's quite a common thing as well. The whole purpose of this show is for us to build a space together. I'm guiding you in the construction of almost like a nest, a safe space for you to fall asleep in. The idea is that you listen to me closely. You listen to my voice as I tell you tonight's story. That you listen, and that stops the spinning mind, the thing that grabs onto the anxieties of the day, or sometimes things that happened to you years ago. I mean, we've all been there, lying in the dark and suddenly remember something you did back when you were in school and how somebody must hate you, which of course is pure nonsense. They've probably forgotten that you exist. Hopefully that makes you feel better. I like the fact that people have forgotten me. But you need to listen to me to stop that spinning mind and just focus on the story. Tonight's story is the 5th episode in my sci-fi epic about the human race leaving our solar system and going to Proxima Centauri. And while it's the 5th episode in the row, I'm going to recap most of the events that have happened previously, all the relevant ones. If you want to go back and listen to those, I wouldn't stress about it, but pop them in your rotation. The sound quality on some of the early ones isn't great, but we all live and learn. So the point is that you listen to me tell the story, that you just listen and your mind is engaged just enough to stop going into your stresses and strains and the other things that may keep you awake at night. Now, ideally, I'm hoping that you're asleep before I get to the end of this episode, but it's important that you don't feel pressurized. It's possible if this is your first night, it may not work for you. We're trying to develop a new habit, a new sort of process for you to get to sleep, and habits and processes take time. This may take a few nights for you. You may need to get used to listening to my voice. My accent may be a little bit strange to you. Maybe one episode just isn't long enough. Something I often do with sleep podcasts is I just let them, I queue up a whole bunch and just let them stream all night. If I wake up in the middle of the night, I just pop my earbuds back in and usually go back to sleep. But it is very important, though, that you try to relax. If you're new to the show and prone to late nights lying staring at the ceiling, it may take you a while for this to work for you. So like I say, just queue up a few episodes and let it go, see how it goes. As I said, sometimes when I wake up at 3 a.m, my stream is still running and the voices just waft me back to sleep. Sometimes I wake up 30 minutes before my alarm goes and they're still playing and I just pop my earbuds back in and I fall back asleep again. That last 30 minutes just before the alarm is sometimes the most restful parts of my night. There's just something absolutely delightful and relaxing about just letting yourself to relax right before the alarm. And so you have the basic idea. You relax and you lie in the dark. And while you do that, I tell you a tale. So relax, dear listener, my nighttime friend who has chosen to lie in the dark listening to my voice. You will always be safe with me. I'm here to help you to relax, to improve your life in a small way. People don't sleep very well these days, and it makes life harder. Insomnia is a public health crisis across this whole world. So I'm here to do my small part to help you in a big way, to help you to face tomorrow and the day after well rested and better able to cope and process. I believe very strongly in kindness. I want to be kind to you. I want to share kindness with you. I want you to be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up or rebuke yourself over not sleeping. Don't get tense if you just can't get over the edge of sleep and fall into the night, even with me here in your ears trying to help. Frustration is one of the great enemies of a good night's sleep. My intention with this podcast is to short-circuit that frustration, to distract that feeling we get when we just cannot get to sleep and we blame ourselves for not being able to let go and drift off. So take a breath. Forgive the fact that you can't sleep and let my voice wash over you and under you. Take another breath. Imagine the warm darkness rising up, inviting you to sleep and to a better life starting tomorrow. And if you can't let go, forgive yourself and try again tomorrow. If you've had a life of insomnia, sleep is something like an enemy, but it is not your enemy. It is a natural process that we have been pulled away from by stress and life and progress that shines bright lights in our eyes at all hours. I'm here to work with you, to create a safe space, a cocoon in which you can curl up and allow nature to take its course. So if you're still with me, thanks for staying. And if you're already asleep, we'll chat again soon. And of course you aren't hearing me, except maybe in a dream. Arrival. The trip of over 4 light years was coming to an end. The great ships of the River's fleet were arriving at Proxima Centauri one by one over the period of a few months, spaced out pretty much the same way that they'd been spaced out as they left the solar system that we live in now. Thanks to the oddities of traveling at relativistic speeds, it felt like 3.5 years to people on the ships themselves. To people watching from Earth, people in the observatories watching as the adventures took place, obviously not with very much in the way of detail, but just watching the energy signatures of the 50 fleets spread across the sky like a handful of stardust. It had seemed like it had been more than 5.5 years. Earth had tried to remain in contact a little bit with the ships. It was extremely difficult at the speeds they were traveling at, though. From basically, because of the speed traveling away, there was a very strong red shift. So the signals were not very powerful. Something that had been done before the ships set out was several unmanned communication stations had been set up in the outer sections of the solar system, of the Earth's solar system, and a couple had been dotted around interstellar space to relay messages, because messages couldn't really travel the great distances, not and be intelligible by the time they got to where they were going. To send a clear signal between stars would take incredible amounts of power, not the sort of thing practical even for the human race at this stage in the 24th century. The communication stations were in some ways very similar to the ships themselves. They had barodrive cores built into ice asteroids. They were fired off, but because they were unmanned, they could accelerate a lot faster than 1G, so they got to where they were going much quicker. And those same drives that had got them to where they were going, very similar to the ones that were getting the human race into Proxima Centauri, were then repurposed by robots to actually just drive the communication relays. So while communication at speed was difficult, by the time the ships got to where they were going, there were messages practically waiting for them. It was a matter of days after the first of the ships of the fleet arrived that it became the first messages came through. Some of them had been sitting buffered in some of the stations for 5 years of Earth time. People received messages from their families of them children growing up and grandchildren growing up, people living their lives. Many of the people on the ships had left behind loved ones who doted on them and didn't forget. Some, however, weren't as lucky, and they'd left behind people that moved on because they knew they were never going to see them again. Something else that was waiting in the Proxima Centauri were the scout ships that had been sent out just before the fleet. They were very small ships with 2 people who were kept in cold sleep for pretty much the majority of the journey. Automated systems controlling the acceleration and deceleration. The ships then arrived. The crews woke up, observed what was going on, and went back into cold sleep, waiting for the fleet ships to arrive, the river fleet ships to arrive. The scouts scouted and sent off signals back to some of the relay stations, and those messages arrived at the same time as the messages from home. Well, they actually received those ones a little bit earlier because they were a lot closer. So as they were arriving towards Proxima Centauri system, they were received. The messages were unfortunately not all that exciting. Proxima Centauri is a red dwarf. It's a main It's a main cycle star that's probably going to last another 4 trillion years. Red dwarfs are very cold and very dim, only a fraction of the brightness of our sun. So there was not much likelihood of life or anything in the orbit of Proxima Centauri, but that was partly why they'd selected it. There were Alpha Centauri A and B, which were very, very close as well, but those may have conditions more suitable for life. So the fleet decided, or the people behind the fleet of the Afropolitan Space Union decided that they didn't want to step straight into someone's backyard, potentially. So they went into the cold, dingy solar system of the Proxima Centauri. There were some Earth-like planets. A few were quite close to the star. Now, the problem with Proxima Centauri as well is a star that flares. Every now and then, the brightness goes up by about 8%, and that makes the closer planets probably not very hospitable, because outside of flare, things may, in theory, be quite pleasant, but when flare time happens, things could get a lot more radioactive and a lot hotter and a lot brighter. But part of the reason the people of the Afropolitan Space Union had moved to Proxima Centauri wasn't to colonize planets. Basically, the Afropolitans, after the chaos of the sort of Renaissance period and the chaos of the 20th and 21st centuries, the people had essentially decided that they weren't going to do colonizing. They were from a continent that had been colonized for centuries and had been abused and misused. So it basically became a point of pride for the people of the Afropolitan Space Union that they would not colonize. They wouldn't arrive on someone else's doorstep and move in and try to take over, or even try land on a planet and try to live with the people there, because those people had their own lives and would be better not, well, any alien life form people or whatever would possibly suffer from having outsiders come in. And so, because the people were used to living on asteroids, hollowed out asteroids and in ships, they moved and decided to remain nomadic even once they were at their destinations. The 50 ships of the Great Fleet arrived, slowly decelerating into the Proxima Centauri system, and most of the astronomical crews were woken up for observation purposes, as well as the primary flight crew, who I kind of regret these names that are generated for them. But the pilot was Raiden Cameron. She had been a very experienced military pilot back in the Sol system. Her co-pilot was Patrick Ilex. He had been an engineer and a miner, and had worked. He had run mining vessels. Corey Deron, they were the flight engineer. They also had extensive experience in mining operations. They weren't a military person. So Raiden Cameron was the commander of the flight crew, and the two non-military folks were her crew, basically. As they arrived, they ran through the checklists. Corey Deron watched very carefully the process of deceleration and the end of the deceleration. The arrival in Proxima Centauri was actually, to be honest, rather anticlimactic. The whole process of accelerating and then turning around and beginning deceleration was all very fraught and exciting. There was a lot that could go wrong at many of those points, but short of accidentally running into an asteroid, there was very little that challenged the arrival in Proxima Centauri. It would take an extremely unlikely event for them to hit into anything, and the engines were just slowing down, so not very much actually was going on in engineering either. Red and Cameron even expressed that. I can't believe how easy this whole process has been. It's been really just... I was kind of hoping for a little bit of excitement. Red and Cameron was a bit of a hotshot pilot in her younger days, and she still had a fondness for adventure. Patrick laughed. Raiden, you always just want something exciting to happen. But, a boring trip is a good trip because it means we've all made it. All of us and our 100,000 passengers we've got packed away here, all these people sleeping in the cold sleep chambers. We've arrived here with no problems. Corey Darren was keeping a very close eye on power profiles and deceleration and things like that. Agreed with Patrick. I definitely agree. You military types are always looking for excitement, but if you grown up on a mining colony and worked as a miner, you'd know lack of excitement means no one's going to die today. There are many fields of asteroids around the star. Resources around a red dwarf can be spread quite thin because lack of gravity and lack of energy in the system means planets sometimes don't form. While there are a few planets, rocky ones, there's no gas giants or anything around Proxima Centauri. So the outer section of the Centauri's Proxima system was just basically dispersed, filled with loose rocks, asteroids and rocky asteroids and ice asteroids. Mostly rocky ones, not a lot of ice, but in something the size of a solar system, there was still plenty to make use of. While all of the Abara Drive ships began to be repurposed for various reasons. 40 of the ships, not including Zambesi, the one in question, were basically spread out evenly around the solar system. They still had plenty of fuel from the journey left, thanks to the efficiency of the drives and the sizes of the ice asteroids those drives were embedded in. So they accelerated out to basically equidistant sections. They were not completely evenly. None of the ships was particularly far away from each other. Of the 40 of them, the other 10 ships, including the Zambesi, which we have followed along with, began to be refitted a little bit for another journey. 5 each of those ships would go to the other neighboring stars. Alpha Centauri A would get 5 and Alpha Centauri B would get 5. Zambesi was going to Alpha Centauri B. These before they left, the 100,000 sleepers on each one would be removed. They also would be spread around among the other 40 ships, and people would slowly be woken up over time as the area became more hospitable. Those 10 further exploration ships would have skeleton crews because they weren't going very far. The other Alpha Centauri A and B are fractions of a light year away, so it would take them probably 4 to 6 months to get to the other stars at the constant acceleration that they were using. Those ships also would not go quite so far into the systems of Alpha Centauri A and B, on the very long, minimal chance that there was some kind of life there that they would possibly disturb. Again, the primary purpose of this fleet was for the human race to spread, but to do it in a way that would not impact any other life potentially out there in the galaxy. Because again, the people of the Afropolitan Space Union were very anti-colonialism, and they were not going to be colonialists themselves. But what was the purpose of the 40 ships spread around? I mean, surely they would make more sense to keep them together. The whole idea was those 40 ships would each be the hub of a whole new... I want to watch my phrasing quite carefully here, because again, the whole point is not for them to take over like viruses or like the destructive creatures human beings can be. But those ships would serve as a center point for nomadic societies that would move around the asteroid belt around them. They were something that was also loaded onto the ships was a huge number of very small, much smaller rather, constant acceleration ships that could move efficiently all around the place and start setting up mining stations and the sort, and start producing food for all the cold sleepers. After all, there were 5 million people who needed to be provided for as they got woken up over time. The ships would provide hospitals and refitting, and it's quite funny here. Sorry, a little bit of an aside. I've got a goldfish tank sitting here next to me. I switch the filter off when I record, but the goldfish are a little bit busy digging through stones looking for food, and I think you may hear a little clicking noise every now and then. That's just a hungry goldfish digging through stones. It's quite funny. It's actually, goldfish are great. They got a lovely personality. My daughter loves them as well. We're trying to teach her responsibility and feed them. Well, she is only 5. It's a little bit of an uphill process. She forgets a lot. She does like feeding them when it's bedtime and it's a distraction. But if it's not bedtime and ask if she wants to feed them, she's not interested. Very wily little 5-year-old, that one. Oh, no, where was I? I was talking about the Abara Drive ships that would be distributed across the Proxima system to provide central points and aid for the mining and new stations that would be set up all over the place. I sort of try to imagine what the smaller ships would look like. Now, obviously, being Abara Drive ships, they would have large sections of fuel, which would be, again, the ice asteroids, with the black hole drives in the middle of them. But I think they would probably not just be giant asteroids on the front, probably something a little bit more akin to a spaceship like we would think of it. They would, I would imagine, sort of the Abara Drive ships turned into space stations, and those little swarms of smaller craft and mining vehicles going in and out of them and spreading across. Some of the information that came from the scouts that had arrived previously was pretty much what was expected. Space is very large and occasionally quite boring. In fact, probably mostly quite boring once you're away from everything. There was no sign of life in the system. That was far too low energy, and the flares of the red dwarfs probably prevented life from taking root on any of the planets. And so the people, while they remained nomadic, settled into the environment and truly became an interstellar species. And while as those people settled into the environment, the other 10 ships fired up their engines and left for the Alpha Centauri A and B. I managed to find some really interesting resources about Proxima Centauri for tonight's episode. I managed to find some really interesting resources for tonight's episode. Maybe if I'd done a little bit of better research, I would have picked one of the other Alpha Centauri planets rather than Proxima Centauri. I figured it makes sense to go to the closest place, but I also didn't realize how close Alpha Centauri A and B actually are. They're extremely close. The exact figure is 0.237 light years away from Proxima Centauri. So basically 3 months of extra travel. But I also thought to myself that the people of the Afropolitan Space Union would not be wanting to potentially impinge on any local people. If there were creatures in any of the Centauri stars, they're far more likely to be in Alpha Centauri A and Alpha Centauri B. Proxima Centauri is not likely to have any life, so it would make sense as a staging point to observe what's going on in the near neighbors and move on from there. I definitely do recommend you check out the links, though. There's a lot of really interesting stuff. Proxima Centauri has a mass of about an eighth of the Sun's and a diameter the seventh of the Sun's. It's very low energy and will likely stay on the main sequence for another 4 trillion years, which is about 300 times the current age of the universe. So it is going to be there an extremely long time. Proxima Centauri is not visible to the naked eye. Unlike its neighbors, which can be seen from Earth. But it's so dim that even from its neighbors, Alpha Centauri A or B, it will be extremely, extremely dim. While Proxima Centauri has been observed quite a lot for the purpose of looking for planets, they've basically ruled out any super-Earths or extremely large planets or brown dwarfs. They would pick up signs of it. There have been signs of small, rocky, Earth-like planets. The Proxima Centauri was first discovered by Robert Innes, the director of the Union Observatory in Johannesburg in 1915. I had a girlfriend way back when. We used to go to the observatory in Johannesburg quite a lot. Couldn't see anything from it anymore because unfortunately it's a very large city with a lot of smoke hanging over it. But it was still very interesting. It had a planetarium and stuff, so they still put on very cool displays. The fact that it's a flare star was discovered in 1951 by American astronomer Harlow Shapley. He compared photographic records of it, and he found out that there was a fairly significant increase in magnitude, about 8% over time. This, at the time, made it the most active flare star known. Because it's so close, astronomers have been able to observe flare activity quite clearly. So it's been a very exciting neighbor to discover. It's not 100% certain if Proxima Centauri actually is bound to Alpha Centauri A and Alpha Centauri B, but it seems very likely that it is. It's very close and it's probably bound and gravitationally bound. They're actually, a whole lot of them are in common motion with few other stars as well. There's a triple star system, 2 binary star systems, and 6 other single stars. So they seem like a whole cluster that move together. So again, as I say, check out the links and have a look. If you're a fraction of the nerd I am, you'll find some of this quite interesting. And that's it for tonight. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining me once again on this episode of the Sleepytime Tales podcast, the sleep aid podcast that's designed around a bedtime story to help you to get a restful night. New episodes will be released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in a new week, but make sure to subscribe in whatever service you use so that you get new episodes and maybe the odd bonus whenever they come out. A reminder that the music for tonight is Undizer Bakumiku. Check out more of their work on their website and their Patreon, which you will find linked in the show notes. Good night and sweet dreams.